Welcome back. Today I sit down in the studio with head coach for AG2R Decathlon, Stephen Barrett. Stephen tries to demystify what pro cyclists do. Like, what type of training are the best riders in the world doing that you and me aren't? We dive really deep on this, and Stephen is super open and transparent. He shows us training files, power numbers from Felix Gall in the recent Tour de France. Just how far off Pogacar and Jonas is he? The answer actually really surprised me. We also talked, as we couldn't avoid, about Sam Bennett, fellow Irishman. Can he get back to the top of the sport? Stephen has a unique take on this. We go really deep on this conversation. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Welcome to the podcast, Stephen Barrett. Stephen, what's the crack?
Oh, good. Good to be here. Good to be here in person.
Yeah, it's good to be here in person. It's a different vibe to it when you're sitting down across from someone. We're all a bit sick of Zooms.
I agree. No, so when you messaged me, I think you were quite pushy that I was here in person. I was like, actually, that's a good idea, because I'm kind of sick of doing Zoom calls and phone calls, and you can be a bit more personal in face-to-face. So
it's interesting to me. We had a similar parallel journey, which I'm sure we'll get into, and now you're stepping into rooms with some of the biggest riders in the world. When you're getting into these rooms for the first time, like, what's most important? Like, is it rider buy-in? Is it going in? Is it putting your blend of coaching, is it imposing on that? Or, you know, how did you think about those first interactions and putting your shape on the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a cool question, because I think irrespective of who you're working with or what industry you work in, first impressions, they do last. And I think I've been reasonably lucky in my career that I've been involved in different sports and different teams where you can make mistakes. And when I got the opportunity then to move up into World Tour with the team I'm currently in, you kind of you know before what you must do to make an impact. And the most important thing really is you need to make the people who you're talking to understand that you're there for them. You're there to make them better. You're not there to get more followers or more likes or more clicks. It really is, you're there to make them better footballers, whatever, drivers or cyclists. And that's really something which I try to be conscious about when I do step into the room with bike riders.
I was chatting to Ed Clancy during the week, obviously one of the best team pursuit riders of all time. I think, was he 3 Olympic gold medals, including the home games, which I can only imagine how pressurised that was for a GB rider. But I was thinking back to a story that I think I heard in The Last Dance, where Michael Jordan was talking about one of the early coaches he had, and he went into a dressing room full of these super talented basketball players, some of the best ones in the world, and he's like, here's how you put on your sock. And they're looking at him going, what? He's like, because if you don't put on your sock right, you're going to get blisters. Now, after you put on your sock, here's how you tie your laces. You pull them up from the bottom. And it was real first principles. And when I chatted to Ed Clancy, he spoke about the early years in the famous Manchester house, where there was Cavendish, Geraint Thomas, Matt Bramier, Ed Clancy, and 2 lads that didn't make it, whose names escape me. They never came through as pro cyclists. But Rod Ellingsworth was little known then, but he said the first thing he tried to do is instill values. So he pulled the whole team together and he made them write down their values. And their values were like, always look like a pro cyclist, so you dress properly, always treat staff respectfully, always be on time. But interestingly, he put down a corresponding punishment for breach of those values. So for not treating staff respectfully, you had to ride the top of the velodrome with no food or water for 3 hours. He was telling me Cav spent some amount of time at the top of that velodrome just circling.
I can imagine. But it's true, because I think back then, that was almost like pre-social media and you didn't have so many outside influences. And now in the world we're in now, fortunately or unfortunately, all these young riders have so much external factors that they have to deal with. But you're exactly right. You have to go back to first principles, which is instilling values. You know, why are you here? What makes you want to be here? And are you here for the right reasons? I think some of the things you just mentioned there with Rod and what he did with some of those younger guys, and even what you said with The Last Dance, putting on sock properly, sounds so simplistic. But that's where we need to, when you work with top level athletes, you often have to take a big step back, take a leap backwards to say, actually, what do we need to put in place? And a good example really for me was my first time speaking with Romain Bardet, or I think more recently was with Greg Van Avermaet. I had maybe 3 or 4 years experience in the team, and Greg came, and Greg has won more bike races than I've had hot dinners. I mean, the guy was like a, he's a freaking superstar. He came in with his gold helmet. He was still the reigning Olympic champion. I remember the first training camp, you're there like trying to tell him, how to put on the heart rate monitor. Now, my background is like, I lectured at one point in my life, and in the first day of first year, you're with your bunch of students, you're telling them what a heart rate monitor is. Yeah. And here I am, 10 years into my career in professional cycling, and you're telling a guy who's Olympic champion, why you should put on a heart rate monitor and how to put it on. And it just, I think sometimes people think that me working where I am, we're at the cutting edge of sports science, or cutting edge of coaching. Often a lot of my job really is bringing things back to basics and instilling some good habits into the riders.
And you mentioned earlier about telling the riders, I'm not here for clicks, I'm not here for social kudos, build my own reputation. Why are you doing that? Is that trust you're trying to build with them early?
I think it's trust. It's certainly trying to build some sort of rapport where if they trust you or they believe you, then they're going to listen to you. And if you get more buy-in, then you can have you're effective. Because irrespective of what you say, or irrespective of how great your training program is or what you're going to say is, if the rider doesn't trust you or believe in you, it's not worth anything. Yeah. It's much more effective having a really bad training program, but the rider believes in it, it's going to be much more effective. And I said, again, I've made so many mistakes in my coaching career where I've had the most scientifically validated, perfect, periodized training plan, but the rider thinks I'm an asshole because of how I act or how I present it. I've got no impact. So really, it's about building trust and building strong relationships with the people you're trying to make.
Yeah, I often think about this. I chatted with Stephen Seiler, and he was talking about if you zoom out far enough on elite or amateur athletes, what normally defines their long-term success is consistency. Can you adhere to a plan, regardless of how simple or complex that plan is? I think as amateur athletes, we get so lost, and I'm sure we'll jump into some of this later, and the nerdy stuff around periodization, distribution of intensity, frequency, duration. But sometimes we get so lost in the minutiae of those conversations or heat training protocols. Is it at 38.5 or 38.6 that we forget that basic cheat code of consistency determines our long-term outcomes here.
For sure. And if you can adhere to it, and that's something we often hear, it's the most effective training program is the one you can stick to. Is kind of what it is. And that's something I try and create in some of my social interactions with riders, but also in my role now, I can work with other coaches and trying to instill values in coaches and how they work. And a big one is trying to maximize adherence, because more adherence equals more effectiveness. And basically what riders want is having an effective outcome where they're getting better. And that's something which I've often been asked, how you can increase adherence, how you can increase consistency. And it's just a bunch of different factors. It's just doing your job well, it's understanding it. It's really not overcomplicating something, but really ensuring you're not bullshitting anybody. Once you try and pretend you know more than you actually do, don't be afraid to say, fuck, I actually don't know. That's actually a good question. I don't know. I'll try and find out the answer for you.
The very best guests I've had on the podcast, the most knowledgeable guests, when I ask them a question, you sit and you ask Sam Impey something about nutrition, you just go, I don't know. Yeah. And you'll catch other guys. I had this heat training protocol expert on, and it was just absolute. I think we're on episode 1400 or something. I think I've not aired one episode with this heat training dude. Absolute nonsense. Like I'm asking him questions. I'm like, I don't know shit about heat training, but I know you're making up some amount of spoof here.
And it's so obvious as well. If you don't know the answer for it, and you come across them so often, even my day-to-day life as well, you come across it so often. You ask a question, and if someone doesn't know, you just say it, and you ask better questions, and we can go and find out. But it's true that there's nothing worse, and unfortunately, I've fallen into that trap before. I've no doubt about it. When I was in my early years coaching, somebody asked you, what about this or what about that nutrition protocol? And you go off in some tangent about some physiological capacity or some mitochondrial biogenesis, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? So it's one thing that I do know. It's a big red flag. What I will do actually when I interview for coaches as well, like in my job also now we recruit coaches, and in the interview process I will ask questions where the idea is that they don't know the answer, and see how they actually respond to it, to see how deep down the hole they go. And do they know? Do they have the perception enough to say actually, I don't know what the answer actually is?
Because there's an interesting thing going on with AI at the moment, where AI will take us in a direction, but if you take, I'm coaching a young lad at the moment, and he's cramping at the end of races. So if he's uncoached, he goes, I'm cramping at the end of races. AI puts in, oh, maybe you don't have enough electrolytes in. And then it just goes deeper down that rabbit hole of maybe you don't have electrolytes. Maybe you just rode too hard all day and your legs are just cooked. Yeah. But it totally excludes that as a possibility, and it'll just go deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole, talking about perfect magnesium, potassium, sodium balances, to the point where he's obsessed with this magnesium. So you almost need a mixture of EQ and IQ now to pause, be self-reflective, and make sure you're going the right direction, because we have tools that can guide us once we know the correct direction.
100%. And it's something I've been asked as well quite a bit, is now the influence of AI and the influence of research and data and so-called data-driven studies and data-driven decisions. How I look at it is, and this is not just to protect my job as a coach, I think AI is going to be very beneficial, but we need to let AI and data guide us and not dictate what we do. I think once we start to be dictated, certainly in our context in coaching, you can go down certain rabbit holes where they can become echo chambers, and you're looking at the wrong problem. You ask AI the wrong question. And a really important thing for us is, and something I try to instill in people is, I'm not so worried about the answers. I want you to ask better questions, because a better question will lead to a better outcome. And like I said, I'm not against AI. I think will it take over my job in 10 years? Probably. But I think right now, I think AI can be a very useful tool, but anybody listening or people looking for answers, just let it guide you. Definitely don't let it dictate what you
I explain it like an assistant. Like if you had a job, a startup, would you piss off playing golf or go riding your bike all day and let your assistant run the company? You probably wouldn't. It just doesn't make very good sense. And that's the way I'm approaching AI.
And it's perfect sense. And that's how it is. It's another kind of pipeline of information that you can get on board for you to make better decisions yourself. And I understand in this day and age, everyone wants that secret session, or that secret nutrition plan, or that secret thing to do with, I've got X money, where do I invest my money? And look, it's quite funny, I'm just back from Tour de France last week, and we've had guys on the bus jokingly putting into ChatGPT, stage 15 of the Tour de France, Pogacar's in the yellow jersey by 4 minutes. What's the likely outcomes of this stage? And they're kind of having a joke about it, and then they will cross-reference on the bus back to the hotel actually what happened and what did ChatGPT say. So the guys are actually using it in a kind of a fun way, but also deep down, they're definitely using it as well to see what they think is going to happen on a certain day.
I think we can definitely go one layer deeper on VeloViewer when we start getting better AI on statistical likelihood of splits in echelons based off wind speed and direction. Like if you apply certain power, I think the forecasting around that could get a lot stronger on AI.
Then I think that's something I've heard as well. I know you've spoken about Ben Healy quite a bit as well, and EF, and I do know a lot of their strategy in breakaways is based on that. Is okay, we have a breakaway with 4 riders, 5 riders. This is the weather conditions. Here's who's in the peloton. We got 4 minutes. What is the likelihood of this going to the finish, or do we just pull the plug and not go? Same thing, like you say, with certain kind of race scenarios based on a typical parkour type, based on what stage it is, based on what the likelihood outcomes are. But that only all gets good by how good the input actually is. So it's giving it better questions and asking it better things. But I think that definitely is something that's going to kick off the next. I know it already is being used in a lot of teams, but certainly in the near future, strategic decisions and sporting tactics, I think, will be definitely more influenced.
But it needs to be run through a lens of cycling people. I think, you're coming from the French culture and Le Métier, it's also important, but you can't overemphasize, it can't disappear, the cycling people. And one of the examples from the recent tours, YouTubers consulting in Visma, and they were getting abused on Lance Armstrong's podcast because apparently the tactic one of the days was to ride so hard to stop Pogacar eating and drinking. How hard do you have to ride to stop someone eating and drinking? Like, what? How can you not eat or drink? I've never seen this. Is it warp speed? Yeah. And how can you eat and drink if Pogacar can't eat and drink?
It's like, I think sometimes I'm not hugely involved in social media just because sometimes problems are created or these like stories are created when there's no story at all. And I think with the likes of, like you said, and go back to your first point about, you need to have a human element. I've been involved on a French team for 7 years. And you mentioned Le Métier and the panache, and that's often a little bit how our team has done, is that just on this perfect day, the planets align and we're in a good breakaway and we just happen to win a stage in Tour de France. That's awesome, but that's also a bit of a dream that you need much more input, you need much more strategic analysis of what's happening. And as I know you're referencing to, again, some of the strategic things that Jumbo did in this Tour de France to try to destabilize Pogacar by having multiple attacks like they did in Col de Granon 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where they did like attack, and he cracked on Col de Loos. But yeah, sometimes you're just like, well, yeah, they're asking the wrong questions really is what is trying to attack a guy to make sure he can't eat or drink. But
speaking of that romance, Paret-Peintre, Valentin.
Yeah.
Well, that was a romantic win.
It certainly was.
He was your team
He was in our team last year. He actually won a stage in the Giro with us last year.
He 54 kilograms or something?
He's 54. He was 52 last year. He's put on a few pounds of muscle, 54 kilos. But the guy he came through our development team in AG2R, and he was with us then last year. And I think he really stepped out of the shadows of his brother, Aurélien, at the start of last year. We're in UAE Tour. And he did that famous lead out for Ben O'Connor when Ben won on Jebel Havit, and did two of them attacked out of the peloton with maybe a K to go, and then Ben won the stage. And then from there, Valentin went on, and I was at a training camp with him last year in Etna before the Giro. He won a stage in the Giro. And then, I was so happy to see him step out of the French team, because with those young French guys, they can just stay in that French environment for a long period of time. And he had the balls to say, do you know what, I'm going to go to Quick Step. I'm going to be Remco's domestique. And he went there, and then to see what he did on Valentin was, when I was there, I was on the side of the road, 5K to go, giving the last beat-ons for our team, and it was just, it was mega. I mean, really was super.
And for a 54 kilogram lad to go to a Belgian team, it's like, were you getting thrown into a load of 1.1s in Flanders?
It's a bit of a little guy thrown into the wolf pack, for want of a better word. But again, for him, he doesn't get, I think with Valentin, he's 54 kilos, but the guy, as they say in French, il frappe bien. He knows how to like rub shoulders in the front of a peloton.
I heard he's super home position.
Incredible. In terms of crosswinds, he's
got to be threshold every crosswind.
Yeah, he is, but he's also is the most. He's just a gifted bike rider. He knows how to move. He knows where to be, and he just doesn't waste unnecessary energy. And that's where our team really maybe didn't see him progressing. Was okay, he's good on a steep climb, but flats, time trials, he's not going to progress. But then you saw him, in the Tour, and I was like.
And speaking of data, that's something we don't do a very good job of capturing still. Efficiency around the bunch. Like, how was Valverde top 5 wheels into key areas in the classics for 15 years? You can't capture that in a watts per kilogram.
Again, super interesting point, because that's actually a terminology we've used in our December camp this year, is basically bunch efficiency. So we all know about FTP, critical power, W prime, threshold, fractional utilization, blah, 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 VO2 max. But a critical one is not gross efficiency, but it's about bunch efficiency. So when you put a guy into a bunch, and they're all more or less this big one homogeneous unit, who's expending more or less energy doing the same amount of work. And that's something that we have reflected a lot on. We've got certain guys in our team who are physiological animals, but have got terrible bunch efficiency. So we've gone back and analysed data from our guys who are in the bunch. Okay, now we know that we've got one or two guys who are poor. How do we fix that? It's a good question. I mean, we're different things we try to do, but it really is. It's a technical, tactical, not tactical. It's more of a technical. How comfortable they are in position. It's trying to expose them to uncomfortable scenarios, but not too often in the season. So then, once we get to the Tour de France or the biggest race, that they're better. We're not going to make them perfect, but if we can make them better, it's already a step.
There's also it's beyond physiology, isn't it? Because anyone that's ridden a bike knows it's like, everyone knows the key points. You need to be top 10 into this section. There's a Darwinian-ness to this. There's a survival of the fittest to it. It's a who's willing to break latest, who's willing to slightly intimidate someone, who's, you know, doesn't have a wife and kids to go home to. It's like all of it feeds into this aura of like, I ride in the top 10. And even the hierarchy inside the teams, you know, we talked about Ryan Mullen off air. I'll chat to Ryan, and just the way Ryan looks at that hierarchy, like, if you're not UAE, Jumbo Visma, get out of the way. What are you doing in my way?
100%. And that is, like you said, the kind of, the food chain or the food pyramid within the peloton. As a spectator, you can look at it, but you look at this beautiful like flock of swallows just going up like the middle of France, but like it's eat or be eaten. Like it really is, it really is, and it's even for me when I'm at races, I'm at the side of the road or I'm in the DS car, you don't feel it. And you're there trying to tell guys what to do, but you can't experience, you can't explain what it's like to be in the peloton. Tour de France is one thing, but a Belgian Classic, even like a 1.1 race in Limousin in the middle of France, they really are eat or be eaten. So you have the physiological capacity, but then you also have to be, excuse my French, you have to be a bit of a nasty guy to make sure you can put your mark on the race. Otherwise, you just you won't last very, very long.
Well, look, your Cork Roy Keane made a career out of being the nasty lad, and it's like there is a bit of nastiness about the best athletes. Yeah. There's a nastiness about Remco.
There is, but like I've coached Ben O'Connor, who I discussed as well, and like people have a perception of Ben of being a bit of a crazy guy, but what he is, he's nasty on the bike when he has to be. Yeah. Because if he's sitting fifth wheel, okay, I'm not going to go near him and I'll just move back behind him. And there's a level of that you need, and that's not put on. That's just, I'm a bike rider. I'm here to do this result. So don't try to come in and take my spot, because you're gonna feel my rot. And I think with some riders, what they've been good at doing is attaching themselves to so-called bodyguards. And Sam Bennett is a good one with Ryan, you mentioned. Like, Sam always says, Ryan's my asshole. Like, Ryan can like be that, like the dustbin. I just kind of, go through and win a stage. Ryan's the guy who gets disqualified or gets declassified. But I'm happy over here. And that's what Ryan's happy to do. Again, now with yellow cards and red cards and whatever else you have now, you can't do as much. But yeah, you definitely need to have, if you're not that type of person, you need to have a strong team around you who can at least protect you. And I think in our team now, we've got Felix Gall, for example, who is not the nastiest of guys. He's a bit too kind. But we've Oliver Nace and Stefan Bissinger, who can at least create a bubble around him to make sure he's in a better position.
When I look at that last stage, which I'd love to get your thoughts on now in the Tour, not the traditional sprint stage over the climb, but the one real beneficiary when I watched that of the time getting taken early was Felix Gall. Yeah. I was like, he is blessed.
And it was funny with that. Like the guy was just on the bus. That he was like, guys, no stress, all's good, no problem. I was like, fucking, this guy is. He was, because he kind of we got word that it was going to be, more or less, time was going to be taken early on. And the thing about it is, it's a super stressful day. Like it is. I mean, it's like this maybe procession, and the first 100k is that there's champagne being passed from car to car, and there's people having their photographs, and that is the case. But once you pass the Palace of Versailles, it's a war. It really is a war. And those cobbles, if anyone's been on those cobbles in the Champs-Elysees, I mean, they're proper cobbles.
Well, Tadej had his best 20-minute power in 2020 on the Champs-Elysees.
Yeah, I mean, it's a proper bike race. It is. So, like, for us, it's the same thing with any race, with the white roads in Strade Bianche, or with the cobbles, even with the last stage in the Tour. I mean, it was incredible spectacle, like incredible. And I was at the Tour the last 7 years, and even last year when the Tour ended in Nice because of the Olympics, didn't have the same vibe. I mean, Paris just brings such a proper vibe. But do I love it? I mean, it's cool to watch it, but yeah, if there's risks of splits and people losing time and losing spots in GC, it's
also like, it's kind of, you're in the bubble a lot more than I'm in the bubble here. So, and the listeners are definitely way outside the bubble. So help us understand this. Like, ASO seem to be the only organization who can make up these rules. It's like, it's like blowing the All-Ireland final up 15 minutes to go. It's like fans would be like, what's going on? How can you take time 50 kilometers from the finish line? ASO, or you never be watching the 3 days of Japan or Dunkirk, or whatever it's called these days. And it's like, oh, we're blowing it up 50k to go. It's like, what, we're racing to the finish line.
Yeah, it's a super good point. And it's one of the nuances of cycling. And I'm not that I agree with it at all, but you're right. Last week in Paris, basically, it was blown up at 50k to go, and that's what it is.
Took 9 seconds on Tadej.
Yeah,
because he was out front when they blew it up.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's twofold. One is that I think off the back of the Olympics last year with the Montmartre, which is a mega spectacle, and I was doing a Von course, which is the car in front of the race where we do recon, and I kind of arrived 10k before the race arrives, and you're like, fuck, this is mega. It was just insane. And that was like half hour before the race even arrived. You're like, man, this is going to be super, super cool. But what's weird is that even the teams, we had no information the morning of the race. The day before, going to Paris, the morning of the race, everyone's like, what's happening? What's going to happen? But what the situation is now, riders have a lot of power, and that the riders will send a joint statement to the ASO and say, well, we're not going to do this because it's too dangerous, it's too risky. Can you imagine Tadej crashing on the descent of Montmartre on wet cobbles? Now, everyone was praying for rain on that day. It didn't rain. It rained, I think, after the first passage. But I think the fear from the ASO, they want to make a spectacle, but they also don't want to have a scenario where Tadej is sitting on the side of the road with a broken collarbone on stage 21 of the Tour de France.
Yeah, but devil's advocate on that was Roglic 6th on GC going into that. Yeah. Primož can handle his bike very, very well. Felix Gall sitting in 5th going into it wouldn't be notoriously the best bike handler in the bunch. You've got to be able to race in the wet and the dry, on cobbles, uphill, downhill, 3 weeks. You've run the risk of Tadej crashing, but look, you ran that anyway because he went full kamikaze mode for the stage win. Yeah. Why deprive Primož, who's carved those skills out through hard work, of his opportunity, of his strategic edge?
Well, I even taken away from my personal biases with our team, and it definitely benefited us. But I agree with you, because it's just people making up rules just for the sake of making up rules. And and that's what makes Tadej such an incredible bike rider. It's not just because he can do X watts per kilo for however long. It's the guy's incredible on cobbles. He's incredible on crosswinds. He's incredible on gravel roads. He's incredible on these descents. He's incredible on the TT. That's what makes him such an incredible bike rider. And then I suppose the question that you should ask is, do gravel roads have a place in Grand Tours? And I'm maybe to the point as I don't think they do.
It's hard, isn't it?
It is, and it's, again, from my point of view, I'm obviously in it, and I was glad that we started in Lille, which is the home of Decathlon, and Van Rysel, which is sponsor of our team, and we didn't have a cobble section. And I was like, thank Lord we didn't have a cobble section in the first 3 days. But I know on TV it would have been awesome. But I think it's fair to say cobbles are in Paris-Roubaix, in Belgian Classics. Gravel should be in Strade Bianche. I'm not one for having these crazy one-off spectacle days in races, because as well, the riders, they're humans. Yes, it's entertainment, but also for them, I've been on buses before when it's wet and there's cobbles and there's gravel roads. And the guys are stressed. The guys have families and kids, and they've got careers, and they've got race programs that they need to fulfill for the rest of the year. They got contracts they need to fulfill. So putting those guys in an environment which is really risk increases exponentially, I also have a little bit of compassion.
Yeah, I can see both sides of this. Having obviously been a bike racer, it's stressful on that side of it. There's nothing worse than waking up on a wet day and you're stuck in Belgium on some cobbled race and you're like, the chances of me going into this corner and coming out are basically 50-50, especially on rim brakes like we were racing on. We were racing on 140 PSI rim brakes.
As hard as you can pump it up, just keep it going on 19 mil tires.
Like a grenade going off.
You were hoping that between pumping your tire, going back to your car to get a gel, that your tire didn't explode.
And you're hoping no one else could actually brake on a descent. But there's obviously places in a Grand Tour that are dangerous. Descents are dangerous. So we can start extending that argument then, the gravel argument, to descents are dangerous. And it's like, they should be part of the race. They've always been a part of the race. It's, I guess, the balance between it's a shit transition stage am I going to tune in as a spectator versus it's a Strade Bianche stage, I'm marking that on my calendar, I'm not going to miss it. Sure. And what does that mean then? I think it means you're selling more tires, you're selling more bikes, you're selling more jerseys, more ad revenue. Where's the balance between rider safety? And I think that's just got to be maybe a stronger, like the CPA haven't, Adam Hansen seems to be doing a bit better than old incarnations, but still doesn't seem massively strong. The power is in cycling is kind of weird. If you think about football, you have the governing body, FIFA, has all the power, and then under that you have tournaments, under that you have federations. That's not the same in cycling. You have one race organizer, ASO, which has basically all of the power. Riders have almost nothing.
No, riders have nothing, and also there's so few spots as well in the World Tour, and there's so many riders now that everyone knows if you have one breakthrough day or one breakthrough race, you can make your career. So riders, it's fine for the more experienced riders to be more cautious and have a stronger voice that we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't have these type of races. But you've got younger guys then who are trying to make the breakthrough into World Tour, and they're like, fucking, I want to race. Let me race these races. So I completely see from both sides. I think just from my point of view, I said I'm speaking more about like the biggest races. I've been in those days where we're preparing the morning of a race. And you see the riders just this huge amount of stress, and it just adds a huge amount of unknown and to what the outcome of the race can be. And I've brought riders to hospitals where they've broken collarbones, they've crashed, they've broken arms, they've broken femurs, and you're that guy bringing a guy to a hospital. And you're sitting in an A&E room for 6, 7, 8 hours. I did it in training camp for the Tour de France with a rider who crashed on a descent. He hit some gravel on a descent. He crashed. So there's you see those things, you see what guys put in, and then they're out for 2 months or 3 months.
But why we have no innovation around safety? Like if we're serious about safety as an actual real conversation, instead of trying to, I don't think this is an either or. It's not like we prioritize rider safety or we take away from viewer satisfaction. We can prioritize rider safety and maximize viewer satisfaction with like. The bunch speeds have got faster and faster, whether it's, I'm sure we'll get on to fuel and whether it's carbohydrates, whether it's aero. Aero undoubtedly plays a bit. Yeah. Dan Bingham spoke in Science and Sport about some of the aero ideas they have coming in, narrower bars, but these seem to be quite toothless. Like if you want to slow riders down, you put them on round spokes. You put them on, we can measure this in data, the effect it's going to have. Why are we not looking seriously at slowing riders down and building something into the jerseys that's like more like you can skate to stop us getting road rash at least?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things there. I think one, I know the Safe4 group as well, which is headed up by a lot of the different teams that are trying to make the races safer. And I think every year you go to races, and I think this year in the Tour, correct me if I'm wrong, there was not a huge amount of big crashes.
Seemed less than that. Considering how sketchy the first few days were.
I mean, the first few days were really sketchy. I think for us, we had one crash with Stefan Bissiger who crashed and he had some concussion. He had to go home. But I think the overall amount of really significant crashes was less. I think what Safe4 are doing, which is a company or as a group, they try to bring in more traffic or more like signs on the road, so we are trying to make the parkour a little bit safer with different things. But like you said, you're exactly right in that bringing in gear restrictions or bringing in narrower bars, is it going to make guys safer? Is it going to reduce speed? No, it's not going to reduce speed, because bike companies, and I'm involved with quite a few of them, are looking to make faster wheels and faster tires and faster skin suits and faster bikes. That's what sells, and that's what's happening. How do you make your races safer? I think it's just that I think it's often the route is what causes the crashes. I mean, even this year we have a lot of descents through really technical villages, through technical towns, road furniture. But as you know, the road furniture is something you can't actually get rid of. So
they used to get rid of it though. Do you remember that?
They did. They used to get rid of like speed bumps, whereas now they don't. Like I remember there was often races, and it's only a few years ago, like there was speed bumps being removed. Yeah. I know where I live in Nice on Col Ez in the Tour last year on the descent with the TT, and there's a bunch of speed bumps and just got rid of all the speed bumps. Yeah. So there's different things you can do. I think for the Tour it's okay because they have the resources. But if you're racing, a Tour of Poland or a Tour of Limousin or whatever it is. They don't have the same.
Did you read Israel writer Rusty Woods? Did you read his blog at all during the Tour?
I didn't see his blog. No,
it's
interesting.
Michael, but it's good. He's a good lad. Obviously, been on the podcast. Nice lads. Racing with him in Canada, but he's some interesting stuff around it. Some of the ones he said, like, we need some sort of safety fabric built in. There needs to be innovations around incentives for innovations around safety, not just aero and heat. There needs to be. He thinks Garmin's bike computers, hammerheads, whatever, are a huge problem. He's like, you don't let drivers look at their phone when they're driving, but we're letting lads descend at 90k an hour.
Same thing with like race radios.
He said that
and
as well.
That's one thing that even our CEO, who's our CEO with our team, has come from Dakar Rally, and his biggest one is like seeing guys where guys are like talking on the race radio, descending at 80, 90k an hour. So he's kind of asking how we can maybe inbuild that into the cockpit, that guys can talk to race radio without having to take their hands off the bars, which is a big thing. But I agree, 100%. I think one thing, everyone's so focused on the weight of bike, the weight limit. I think that's something that the UCI probably should maybe look into a bit more, is actually increasing the weight limit, because now it's 6.8 kilos. And I know every team is like working to make that as light as possible. And you're not going to add on another kilo or kilo and a half of protective garments on you if it's going to cost you, again, adding on 2 kilos is going to cost you X 10 seconds per kilometer on a mountain time trial, for example. But I agree. You look at other sports like mountain bike, where you've got protective bib shorts or protective jerseys, because now you see guys crashing. They're crashing at 50, 60k an hour, and I mean, just like they're half their skin is missing, which is just it's not pleasant.
And it's not pleasant at the time, but it's like you look 10, 15 years later, every time the sun comes out, I still have this weird uneven tan, and it's like, what happened there? You look like you fell into a fire. It's like basically I did.
It's true, and you should start. Like I do know it's definitely been discussed. But again, it's just it's the resources that's required to really get that to market, get that to test, get that.
Well, for me, it's around incentives. Like if you think about race organisers, to take ramps out or not take ramps out, there's obviously an economic cost to taking ramps out, but there's no incentive for them to take the ramps out. But if you were to start grading races, which would be easily done, I'm sure we already have the resources to do it. Okay, here's the 10 most dangerous races of the year. Here's your penalty for being one of the most dangerous races of the year. Here's your incentive for being in the top 5 safest races of the year. You get, the Grand Depart's coming here in 2 years' time, because Poland is historically a very safe race. You're getting the Grand Depart. And it's like, we don't have this data, so we can't make good decisions. I'm sure if you chatted to the riders, you sat them down and said, what's the sketchiest finish of the season? There'd be a massive consensus around what the the classic, the Groenewegen crash, really.
Yeah, Depan, Bruges Depan.
Yeah,
downhill sprint. Everyone knew that. The downhill sprint. You've got guys who've got 58 2-chain rings, downhill sprint, and already in sprint scenarios, they're like super chaotic. And then you add on 10k an hour faster than normal. Again, just decision making time becomes less, and you're going. And like I said as well, the reward for the riders to get a result or get a podium, and they're huge. And this is the thing, is that you're not about incentivizing races, but the incentive for bike riders is incredible. Like if you win a stage in Tour de France, or if you win a sprint finish, it changes your life. Like guys can go from earning like minimum wage to earning more money than they ever dreamt of over the course of 1 or 2 days, without question. Yeah, there's many examples of it, with rider contracts in cycling. So that's as well as that the reward for riders is huge. So they're like, when they see risk, they tend not to be too risk averse, to be honest with you.
What do the Giro d'Italia, Stage Slayer, Mads Pedersen and half the professional peloton have in common? Well, they're all turning to Nomio, the natural performance enhancer proven to reduce lactate buildup during intense efforts. In the 2025 Giro d'Italia, Pedersen's form was undeniable. The Danish star surged to 4-stage victories. This was a major leap in form from his previous season, and a key part of this preparation and performance was Nomio. Developed by the same researchers who discovered the performance power of dietary Paret-Peintre nitrate. You know those beetroot shots that half the peloton were using? Nomio is clinically proven to lower lactate levels, reduce oxidative stress, improve training adaptations, and deliver a noticeable boost from the very first time you take it. Riders are reporting bigger threshold power, fresher legs mid-race, and quicker recovery, all from a formula made with just 3 natural ingredients: broccoli sprouts, lemon, and sugar. Whether you're racing at the front or you're smashing local segments, Nomio helps you get more out of every ride. Take it before key sessions or races for an immediate edge, or take your training to the next level and get more out of your hard work. Go to drinknomio.com, that's Nomio, and check out this game-changing supplement. Details are in the episode show notes or description down below. So slightly changing gear, Stephen, you're obviously working with some of the best riders in the world. You know, you talk about Ben O'Connor last year, Bobby Ungles, Tour de France stage winner, Sam, you know, one of the best sprinters of a generation. When I speak to the best coaches, I've had the chance to speak to some great coaches in the podcasts, you know, Dan Lorang, Olaf Boo, John Wakefield, Christian Schrout. A lot of the topic, regardless of how you frame it, it really is, how do we organise the chairs around the table of the Titanic? It's like there's only so many variables we're playing at here, and it seems to me the 3 main levers you can pull, and all the coaches will pull them in a slightly different direction, is frequency, duration, and intensity. When you're preparing a rider for building them towards a Grand Tour and you're starting the off-season plan, how do you think about this distribution of frequency, duration, and intensity?
Yeah, and that's the way to look at it. It kind of, you bring it back to those first principles, which is frequency, intensity, time, and type, as what I learned in school many years ago. But when you do kind of sit down in the off season, be it October, November, to plan out a season, you always have to work back from what the biggest goal is. And then when you're working with riders who are not development riders, you're looking at being competitive in the biggest races. You look at what are the demands of the event. So now with data, it's quite good that we can actually look at what are the demands of being top 5 Tour de France, winning the Tour de France, being competitive in the classics, and then we work back from that. So you're looking at now to be competitive in the classics, you got to ride at 4.5 watts a kilo for 5.5 hours.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I mean, it's insane. So when you actually break that down, okay,
when you say competitive, that's like top 10.
I mean, being competitive is actually being in the race. Yeah, it's actually being a factor in the race. And then you can race to win, race to be competitive, race to help a leader, and just race to exist. And we have a lot of our young guys will just race to exist. Some of our neo pros or some of our Devo guys will go in and race to exist, just to experience. But like you said, we have demands and we have riders who are capable of being competitive in these races. So we will always work back and look at what demands are of these races. And then based on that, then we just have to build a program how we can expose the rider to be able to meet those demands. So we look at the determinants of
how are you
success.
Quantifying the demands? Is it just a watts per kilo demand? Is it a kilojoule demand? Is it a time above 500 watts demand?
It's all those things. So first and foremost, really, you're looking at what is like the average, the average kind of watts per kilo for a race. Just to give you a general idea, we don't look at how that's distributed yet. We just see what the general average is for the intensity of a race. So it might be 4.5 watts a kilo on average. Then you're looking at, sorry then, which again is a terminology we've seen a lot, is fatigue resistance, durability, is again at what point in those races, how many kilojoules are expended, if it's after 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and then the effort required post 4,000 kilojoules. So those are really the two big ones, because we're seeing now races are going faster. There's more kilojoules being burned, but riders still have incredible resources to tap into their peak power, their best peak numbers after 4,500 kilojoules, which is...
And so how does that manifest itself then? Like in a training specificity, as you get closer to the event, now I'm guessing my training sessions are going to suck because I need to put down 4,000 kilojoules before I do my key intervals for the day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how we build it. So in the off season, the kind of biggest aim really is to build volume. That's one of the most important things we try to do, is build volume, because volume, one of the key outcomes of just more volume is better fatigue resistance or more durability. But certainly as we're getting closer to our key events, we're looking to expose the rider to stimulus after 4,000 kilojoules to see, okay, how can we extend out 500 watts, 550 watts, 600 watts after 4,000 kilojoules. So we'll be gradually increasing the duration of effort of intervals following expenditure of energy. So like a good example is, in December camp, we'll have high energy days, for example, which will be, we look to burn 1,000 kilojoules per hour is a good like indicator of how a race may be. And then in end of January camp, we look to do that and also layer on some intervals into that session. We'll do like maybe, again, 5 times 4 minutes. So we look at 12 times 1 minute on, 1 minute off, just to expose them to that high power under fatigue.
So rewinding back to that base period, you're talking about the goal is to accumulate volume. How are we defining volume? Anything to the left of LT1?
Yeah, so initially it's left of LT1. So what most people will term, and I know it's kind of different terms for zone 2, upper zone 2, lower zone 2, but for us, December camp really is about building, again, anything left of LT1. So that kind of lower zone 2 range. And like we'll have riders now building up towards, they'll be aiming in around 22 up as far as 28 to 30 hours per week
of easy volume.
Yeah, of easy volume. It's huge, but and it's a lot more than what was done 5 years ago. And it's the trend that we're moving in towards, is that there's people do more volume. When you do more volume, you have to layer on as well the other level of recovery, and nutrition also is a huge factor. So I said for us, a December camp really is your stereotypical like high volume.
And is it all zone 2? Because I was curious when I was talking to Vasilis Anastopoulos, the Stana coach, where he talked about quite a lot of zone 1 for his riders now, and the idea being that they can go longer with zone 1 with less residual fatigue the next day. So if he zooms out and he looks at a week that he includes more zone 1 volume, they're carrying less fatigue but also getting through more of that base.
And I think that's where it comes when we will periodize when we do more polarized training, which is more zone 1, and you've got less fatigue, so you can do better, higher quality, high intensity. And then we've got more your standardized zone 3 or your tempo work, which is more race specific. So that's important, that we don't just follow one training prescription, that we will wave between polarized training and more of your block periodization. We would do more kind of mid-range zone 3,
makes
zone
total
4.
sense, because we had the same coach we talked about off air, Rick Stern, back in the day, and so much of that was, I remember having this, I can't remember what exact numbers were, I think it was maybe 200 watts was the start of my zone 2, 200, 220, around that somewhere, the start of my zone 2. But it was like, it felt like this edge, like if I went 205 watts, all of a sudden I should have stayed at home. Yeah. And I remember coming in from I'd meet a friend for a social ride and I'd come home at like 190 average. Yeah. Big thick head of me thinking that was a waste of 6 hours. What was I doing? Yeah. And that's changed so much in 10 years.
It's changed hugely, and that now I look at guys how they train now in December, and like when I was back riding, like I said, you're out and you're pushing 290, 280, 300, and you're looking to get the bonk. And then you're like, now, like that doesn't happen at all anymore. Like I think with us, it depends also the type of rider that it is. Like we've got a bunch of sprinters now and classes guys. We'll do a lot of polarized work in December camp, which allows us to do more of your race specific 4.5 watts a kilo extended efforts in January closer to a race, because that's in essence what those races are made up of, is just who can sit at 320 watts for 5 hours and still be good at the end of a race.
So talk to me about recovery rides. Stephen Seiler, when I chatted to him, had this idea of recovery rides aren't a thing. He's like, it's an oxymoron. You're either recovering or you're looking for a training adaptation stimulus. Zone 1 rides, then for me, it's like, where's that falling in? I'm looking to build, because zone 1 is typically what I would have classed as recovery back in the day. So I might have raced Saturday, Sunday, had an hour recovery coffee ride on a Monday. Am I canning that hour recovery ride now, or am I extending it now and saying it's a zone 1 ride?
Yeah, I think with the recovery ride, it's such, like you said, it's a real, almost like a paradox. We will always put them into training programs. We'll do 3-day block recovery ride, 3-day block recovery ride, 2-day block, whatever it may be. And what actually is a recovery ride? And like a recovery ride is the days, your days to recover, so you can be good for the next block of training. What I found in the previous years, that guys were just going out and doing an hour and a half of maybe like 220, 240, 250 watts, and actually they weren't recovering at all. It was just, you almost push on too much. So what I tend to do now, I'll often try and prescribe with the guys I coach, is we'll do more like indoor stuff. We'll do some on rollers where we're doing more neuromuscular work. So we'll do higher cadence where the body is just moving, but the overall energy expenditure is really quite low. So I think the question really is what you're looking to achieve. Like I will often give a guy a recovery ride for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, but I don't really care what they do. It's just more for them to mentally switch off.
Yeah.
But
why not take the day off?
That's which I will often tell guys to do, take a day off. But I often find, but the feedback I get, if a guy takes the day off, they feel
stale next
blocked
day.
Or stale the next day because their body hasn't moved. And it's really it's one of those unanswerable questions. What do you do in a rest day in a Grand Tour? And every year we do the same thing. Some guys will do 2 hours, some guys will do 2 hours and a half, some guys will do sprints, some guys will do nothing, some guys will go for a coffee ride. And I found everybody responds completely differently. Like for us in the Tour de France, we had 8 guys, and we had 2 doing 45, 1 doing nothing, 2 doing 2.5 hours. And I'm like, okay, whatever you think you need, let's discuss it, and then let's make it work for you.
Is there any physiology behind recovery ride? Is there a clears metabolic waste products? I think was one of the catchphrases I remember from back in the day.
Yeah, and also it's as well as that you're trying to make sure that it's at a high enough intensity that you're basically producing some lactate that you can clear your lactate metabolites. Whereas if it's too easy, you're actually causing no real physiological response. And if you're going too hard, then you're creating fatigue. So some people try to over prescribe. And I remember when I was doing it, I had a coach and he was like, you need to do your recovery at 220 watts because that's the optimal lactate production range for it to have that cycle of production clearance. But for me, it's like movement. It's also mentally as well, just a switch off that you don't have to think about what your power meter says, what your Garmin says. And that's how I do it. And it's worked pretty good. And going out for a coffee ride with your mates, I've seen this with our guys. Like they go out and they have so much joy just going to a nice coffee shop, sitting down for half hour. I mean, that for me is just this is not even, I'm not even joking. I spend more time on the rest days finding the best coffee shop nearby that I would make a parkour to it. Guys would do and then come back, and if the guys had a nice coffee shop, coffee, I was like, awesome, my job is done. And that really allowed us to have that our recovery days were just good.
So can we extend that idea of a minimum intensity for metabolic clearance to in between intervals? If I'm doing, a classic 2x20 threshold intervals, what's the optimum intensity and gap in between those 2x20 for effective clearance?
That's a cool question, because then you got two questions. One, are you looking to optimize train lactate clearance or lactate tolerance? So what I will try and do if I'm looking to maximize those two 20-minute efforts, I think minimum 8 minutes is what you need. 8 to 10 minutes is what you need between the efforts, and somewhere around about your zone 1, where you're producing a little bit of lactate, that there still is turnover in that whole system to make sure your body is clearing what it's produced already. Because when you do a 20-minute effort, your lactate is going to go up. You want to make sure that is back to as close to baseline as you can before you start the next effort. Unless you're looking to improve your lactate tolerance, where you want to start your second effort with a slightly higher lactate in the bloodstream, so then you're working more of a lactate tolerance, and also clearing lactate at a higher power output. So that'll be a key session that we will do sporadically during the year, where we're looking to I think, because now when you look at races, a lot of climbs now will start off with the first 2 minutes is full gas, then we'll knock back down to close to threshold, which is maybe inverse to how it was maybe 10 years ago, which it was you'd arrive and it would be build. Guys would get dropped. You'd be left with the last 4 or 5 guys. Now climbs are like 5 minutes, full gas. You got a massive peak, a massive load of lactate. And then you got to go back to your threshold and actually get rid of lactate at 400 watts or 390 watts.
I love that answer though, because I'm often asked, a question I get in all the time on Instagram or wherever is like, you get to chat with all these World Tour riders, coaches inside the World Tour. Like, what's the golden thread that connects them all? And unknowingly, you stepped into that golden thread there, where you thought about, well, what's the purpose of this session? Like, why are we going out the door? We're not going out the door to turn a box green on our training peaks. We're going out the door looking for an adaptation. And it's like, what's the adaptation we're looking for today? Is it building our threshold, or is it lactate tolerance? It's the same session, but there's 2 different objectives in the session. And I think as amateurs, we don't do that enough. We just go, it's a 2x20. We don't question one layer deeper like you do.
And that's why I think for me, my job is actually quite easy because I can look at the demands of a race. Whereas when you're an amateur, maybe it's more difficult. You have to start looking at where are your maybe deficiencies. Is your sprint not so good? If there's a big attack and you're in a breakaway, do you get dropped? Can you recover? So it's about asking, again, back to what our first point was, asking better questions. And that's why I suppose in my early coaching days, it was about how I can improve thresholds, improve sprint power, improve VO2 max. Whereas now my question is, how can I make sure Felix can follow Pogacar for as long as he can? Or how can I make sure Felix doesn't get dropped at the bottom of La Plana, or he can go on Col de la Loze, or he can attack on whatever mountain it is? Those are the questions that I will ask. But I'm also fully aware that my job actually is easier because those are easier questions to ask. Whereas if I'm an amateur, like I'm not sure, could I coach amateur now because I have no idea like what an amateur race consists of. I need to probably go back and ride my bike a bit because I don't know what it is anymore. I'm so used to kind of coaching now in a very controlled environment where we have so much data and I can just go in and look at my power files and be like, okay, to go and be competitive in Paris-Roubaix, you need this. To go and be competitive in a stage in a Grand Tour, you need this. And yeah, that's why I'm always really conscious that coaching World Tour, when you have experience, is easier than coaching freaking amateurs.
But so how much are you building a plan for, you say you take the classics or you even this extends to Phoenix Gall going into the Tour de France, how much are you building a plan to maximise Felix Gall's potential around the terrain versus playing to the strengths and weaknesses of other people? Like I remember chatting with Fred Wright, I'm not sure if it was on air or off air, but I was chatting with Fred, and if it was off air he won't mind me saying, he was in the break in Tour of Flanders, the early break, and he got caught by Van der Poel and Pogacar. I said they came across to him, he hung on, so it was the three of them at one point, and he said, do you remember when you're like a Cat 1 and you'd catch like the Cat 2s or Cat 3s and you'd have a lad on the back, but he's getting such a hiding that you wouldn't even ask him to come through because you're like, oh, I know he's not going to be there in the finish, so I'm not even going to bother bullying him. He said it was that. He's like, I would have liked to even get a bit of abuse, but he's like, they just ignored me and just kept riding, knowing they're just going to ride away from me soon. He's like, I felt this small. Like I felt irrelevant. Yeah. So how do you play to that in terms of catering if we go back to first principles, training, starting to mirror the demands of the event as you get closer to your specificity? Are you looking to mirror the demands of these X-Men and going, can we be the last to hold on to these? Or are you just playing your own game?
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's probably like the golden goose, or the question, do we try to prepare our riders to be able to do what Pogacar does, or what Vingegaard does? And you can't do that. However, you have to be conscious you're racing against those guys. Therefore, you need to know what they're capable of doing. So it's a question it's something that I will say to our development coaches a lot, is that I don't really care if you increase your threshold by 5 watts next year and then 10 watts the year after, another 5 watts. I care, can you be competitive in the race next year? Can you be competitive in the race we're doing? And if you're 10 watts better on your threshold, I don't really give a shit. But if that 10 watts is not translating us to be competitive. So to answer your question, a lot of what I do now, certainly with likes of Felix or with those riders like Ben last year, was very much around about, here's what you need to do to win this race or to be competitive. You need to be able to put out 7.4 watts a kilo for 5 minutes. They need to be able to go and do 6.5 watts a kilo for 20 minutes. That's what you need to do.
If you're in position. So let's focus on
doing that in training, and then let's focus on building that position and building those things in place in races to make sure you can be there. And there's a good video, I have it saved on my phone, of the Giro last year with Ben on stage 3 or stage 4 when Pogacar does he's now famous attacks, and Ben is on his wheel, and then Pogacar sits down and Ben is still there, and then Pogacar looked, and then he went another attack, and then Ben blew up, and then I saw Ben's face. He was like, Pogacar's here, Ben is here, and then you got Hindley, Martinez, Thomas, 50 meters behind him, and he's like, shit, I've just blown my beans.
I actually remember this stage.
It was on stage 4, and then it was like he completely effed himself because he went too deep. The group came across, he got dropped from the group, and then we were playing catch up the rest of the Giro d'Italia. But that was such a mad learning thing for him. I was like, fucking chapeau, because you weren't afraid to go there. And you hear this thing always now about people saying, I flew too close to the sun, I got burnt. But
so Tadej is the sun.
Tadej is the sun, exactly. Yeah, and it's just, it's like I said, I remember saying, and what's funny, that morning I said to Ben, because I knew he was good, I said, Ben, just know when to pull the plug. Go, but know when to pull the plug. And he didn't pull the plug at the right time. But he learned that, okay, I can move, I can create a gap, I can create distance, but know when to switch it off. Know when you need to pull off and do your own pace. Group comes across, and you're all of a sudden there's Pogacar alone, and you're like 4 guys, 5 guys, and then you're in your bike race. So that really is something that I try to do is allow them to express themselves to the best of their capacity, but also knowing that, yeah, here's what we need to do, so we're building towards that, and we have to do a bit of a gap analysis of
how far off the best, like Felix Gall, you take him. Like, I seen Jonas' stats from Valentin, and for me, I think they're the best stats I've ever seen. Tadej's are slightly lower because he was in the wheel. Yeah. I don't want to misquote, I think it's 6.9 watts per kilogram for 54 minutes. It's the highest I've ever seen.
Yeah.
How far off that is Felix Gall?
I mean, straight up, he's a bit off. He's not where those guys are at. I mean, Felix is probably, I know Felix gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes because he's not the most technically gifted guy, but he's probably one of those guys who has ridden alongside those guys previously. I know in 2023 and on the stage 20, it was him, Tadej and Jonas were the last 3 standing. I think Felix came second. But again, on Ventoux Le Plan, I think Felix got dropped actually quite early this year on Ventoux. He was really hot. He had a bad moment. Then he basically did the last 10k himself.
It was hard racing into Ventoux this year.
It was super, super hard. And go back to the point we discussed earlier on was in terms of bunch efficiency. Like, I got the power file from Felix versus our helpers, and our helpers who are sitting on the front of the peloton eating wind are using less energy than Felix is in the peloton.
Yeah.
So I mean that's something that we have to work on with him. But Felix, you know, he's certainly in the upper echelons of the elite climbers. He regularly do 6.5, 6.6 watts a kilo, you know, for plus 30 minutes. We did a lot of race simulation efforts when we did a training camp in altitude. Before the tour, we were doing a lot of efforts in that 6.4 to 6.6 watts a kilo range because I knew that's where he needed to be. And those are quite risky days because you're going there, okay, boys, today I think we did 4 by 9 minutes, and we did 5.8, 6.2, 6.5, 6.6, something to that effect. And I was like, if he fails, I mean, I'm in big trouble. Because now we're 3 weeks out from the Tour de France. So you're trying to make sure you're giving him enough exposure to what he needs, but make sure he doesn't fail on those efforts, because always on race day the guys will always do more than what they do in training. Like, those guys will never do those power numbers.
But so what are the guardrails for you to go, it's a bad idea to do this session today because the chances of fail here are higher than the chance? Are you looking at heart rate variability, sleep stats? What's determining that?
This, and like, that's the je ne sais quoi. That is what it is. It's one of those guardrails, and knowing not to put your toe too deep into the water or to push it too much. And I look back on the training camp that we did in altitude, and for whatever reason, and I reflect on it, I kind of reflect most nights, and that was probably one of the best camps we have done, or we did, because there was no moment where he blew his lid. But what we did do, I was very confident, that's because I've worked with Felix now for 4 years, that he came into the camp almost too strong. He was very, very good. And we front loaded the camp, so I basically smashed him for the first week in altitude. Then he had a bit of a dip in the middle of it, and which he was a bit worried about, and I was like, okay, this is how it should be. Then by the second part of the camp, he was on the build back up, and that second part of the camp was we started to expose him to those efforts. And to answer your question, I don't know. It's a bunch of things. We were in camp for 3 weeks. I see him at breakfast, I see him at lunch, I see him at dinner. We chat at night time. We have a coffee together. I'm in the car for 6 hours a day watching the guys. So it's all that kind of like subconscious information comes into me, and I just make decisions based on.
You know what actually just reminds me about a teammate who you probably know as well, one of my probably one of my favourite teammates, used to always room in the Ross, Sean Lacey. I learned so much from Sean. I thought I knew about cycling until I started rooming with Sean, and it was just layers to the onion. But before big stages of races, we'd always listen to Kenny Rogers, the gambler. And there's a line in there: I made my career out of reading people's faces, knowing what the cards said by the way they held their eyes. It feels like a little bit of this, that you're looking at, what's a stare like at breakfast? You know, is he bringing the bowl to his mouth, or is the spoon coming from the ground?
I mean, you laugh, but that's generally what it is. And that's kind of where my job, really what makes me an effective coach is being present. And that's what I find now is my job. I'm super lucky now. Yes, I coach and I look at Training Peaks and I'm on Zoom and I'm on WhatsApp, but actually being present at a race or at a training camp for 3 weeks, for 2 weeks, for 10 days is incredible. And you know it from going on group rides with people and seeing people's face in group rides and
the hips start going or something.
Everything starts going, their hips going, their elbows going, their elbows come out. You're like, it's funny with Felix, I'm in the, not just him, but like guys I'm behind, and I know his elbows come out, oof, that's 420 watts right there. And then he goes like, that's 450 now. We probably should keep it at that, not going any deeper.
You have Ben Healy with the head tilt.
Exactly, yeah.
You've seen the memes on
that's
Ben Healy.
It's like
zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 5.
That's kind of the kind of thing of being a coach, is trying to, you know, learn those things about the riders you coach. And it goes back to really understanding them and knowing them, you know, not just the numbers, but knowing exactly how their body is responding to those efforts.
How do you weigh these up? So if we think about this almost holy trinity, are you using Training Peaks or Vecta?
We use both. I use both. Yeah. So we'll have Training Peaks is our training diary, for one of a better word, and then we'll use Vecta then as well. We've got Alex Camier, one of our coaches, was heavily involved in development Vecta as well with some of their algorithms. So we use that as well as a tool to quickly analyze some sessions and also give us again some input, so then we can guide what we should do with the riders.
So if we have this data layer where we'll lamp in resting heart rate variability, sleep scores, Training Peaks Vecta data, we have what the riders are saying and then what you're observing. How are you weighing these three up in the trifecta?
I think what the rider is saying for me is so important. Like the subjective feedback is so important. It's often the most difficult thing to get from riders because you can look at data and data tells you only very much half of the picture. And a guy can go and do good watts, but if they feel good or bad, or if it feels easy or feels really, really hard, that tells you so much more. So for me, I will look at the like I said, the HRV, the heart rate, a lot of those quantitative metrics, along with the power heart rate, the heart rate drift, so on and so forth. But for me, always the comment or the little message, a little voice note adds so much more info to that making a better decision. So I will weigh how they feel significally harder than what
there's more of a depth to that signal.
Yeah, that's what it is. Way much more, way more, and that goes well with the connection you have from the rider to the coach, from the rider to the coach. If there's good understanding, there's a good relationship there, that subjective info for them becomes even more powerful, and it becomes even more useful to making better decisions. And I will with certain riders, I will make decisions based on how they feel. Like, and that's we go back to your question, which is a really good question. How do we create guardrails in a training camp? I'll have a coffee with the guys at 7:30 a.m. or 8 a.m. over breakfast, and I'll okay guys, today we're doing this. And I'm not attached to my program. I'll write a program, spend a lot of time doing it, but I'm not at all precious about it if we have to change or modify or increase or decrease. And I think some coaches can be a little bit precious. Follow the plan. But no, you have to also be adaptable to what's in front of you.
Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4Eyes offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter, where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4Eyes Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below. What's the place of heat training now?
I mean, it's something that we do a lot of.
Not from an acclimation point of view, from a physiological response to it.
Yeah. And it's a good thing to separate those two, is that you have heat training and heat acclimation. I think heat acclimation is something that you do before going to a hot environment, tour down under, or you go to UAE tour, for example. That can be done in 5-6 days. But then with the heat training, which is something that maybe we do over the course of a 4 to 6 week block, we do it in two scenarios. One is during training blocks. So we'll do it in December, January camp, where we'll add on some sort of active heat training following a training session. The guys will come back in and they'll do home trainer for maybe 45 minutes after an outdoor session.
38.5 degrees.
Yeah, plus or minus 39 degrees. Yeah, so we measure. Some guys have the core sensors. We also have used in the past the pill which transmits the core temperature, and again we also use the in-ear temperature as well, which I use for my kid as well if he's got a temperature.
And that's a real thing, because everyone thinks they need to spend on tech all the time, but a lot of this stuff, it's, if you have a kid.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff as well is just, it's a number. So sometimes the number isn't actually the number. It's giving you a bit of a guide, and that's why with your thermometer that you get from the pharmacies, it can be just a good a tool to
because none of it's giving you your temperature. Maybe the pill's giving you your temperature, but it's skin temperature, which is a proxy for your actual core 100%. Temperature.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the pill is probably the most reliable. The problem with the pill is we don't use it as much, because if a rider has a crash, you need an MRI. That can have an impact with an MRI. So that's why with the core sensor, it's probably the most user friendly. But it's giving you a skin temperature, and then it's using an algorithm then to kind of give you your core temperature. So we'll use that alongside. You got thermal feeling, so guys will give a bit of an idea of what the thermal temperature feels like. But we will use that again quite extensively during the season, where we'll do blocks of it before races. Not just if you're going to a hot environment. And also I think where we use it the most, or I found it to be most effective, is post altitude camp pre-race.
That's what I've heard, extending the effects of altitude.
So like for us, we'll do altitude camp, Dauphiné, heat, Tour de France, or we'll do altitude Tour de Suisse, heat, Tour de France. So we'll use it certainly post altitude camps to make sure we can delay the decay of the benefits you get from altitude.
If you don't go to altitude and you just do a heat adaptation protocol, how long after coming off the heat protocol do you find it's returned to baseline?
I mean, it's quite rapid. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of those things, it's quite rapid. When you look at altitude, you look at heat, the decay is quite rapid in those first 5 to 8 days post you stop the intervention. So what we try and do is, sometimes with certain riders who don't do altitude, we'll have a 6-week quite extensive block, maybe of 3 to 5 sessions per week. And then we'll do a maintenance, or what we try to call a maintenance, where they might do 1 to 2 exposures. If it's passive, if it's active, if they do a hot bath, if they do some sort of heat exposure or sauna, we'll try to do that. Does it have an effect in delaying the decay? I think so. We haven't really tested it, but I think having 1 or 2 sessions per week can certainly help in minimizing the delay.
We still don't do a super good job, and I chatted to Christian Schrout from Jaco about this. We still don't do a super good job in the gap between stimulus and adaptation, understanding what drives adaptation in different riders. How do we close? Is it possible, do you think, to close that gap between stimulus and adaptation? The example I'll give is, if we're looking to add someone's 20-minute power, are we better off doing 4 by 8-minute threshold efforts, 2 by 20-minute threshold efforts, 2 by 15-minute threshold efforts? We don't really get the answer for this for quite a long time.
Yeah, and that's one of the kind of problems you have as a coach is you do a lot of trial and error, and you're trying to figure out what actually works with riders, and you're exactly right in that. How can we fast track the understanding to make sure we can give the rider the best stimulus for them? And that goes to heat, it goes to altitude, it goes to, is a rider going to respond better to block periodization, polarized? Because I've had riders who just do not respond to polarized training. They just don't. They just, whatever reason, they don't respond to it. And then you often hear about responders, non-responders. But then I begin to maybe believe that it's just not being done well. I do believe people will respond to most stimulus you give them, but we need to make sure we understand the dose, the timing, again, to use...
But I guess it's the degree of response you were after as well.
That's what it is. You're looking at it, like I said, go back at what I said a while ago was, I don't really care if this method will give us a 5 watt improvement in your threshold, but if this method is going to give us a 10 or 15 watt, the degree of improvement is much more important to us. I think everything is going to give you a benefit if you're consistent. But I think certainly we have a lot of riders who just will respond to certain types of training. But I think a lot of that goes back to belief. A lot of that goes back to the riders understanding, is this actually making me better? Do they understand why they're doing it? And if they understand the why, I think then you get a lot more impact.
This is maybe the biggest disconnect I see from when I speak to academics who aren't practicing in cycling and cycling coaches or physiologists. The academics care about, hey, we ran this double-blind placebo test with 200 participants. Here's the data. The coaches care about, what effect does it have on Felix Gall? What effect does it have on Primoz Roglic? I don't care what effect it had on the 200 people.
Yeah, and that's one of the disconnects that I said that there is between research and practice. And there's all this big push now to have data-driven decisions, and you're right, because a lot of now the research papers that come out, they're done in maybe different types of people or different levels of athletes, and you actually can't really quantify actually is this having an effect or not. I think a lot of again, I'll use data, and I come from an academic background. It's one of the reasons why I left academia was because the disconnect was huge. I was having to teach students like academia, which I knew wasn't actually happening in the real world, and that kind of got me I was a bit frustrated with that. But a lot of the real world stuff, like what we do in coaching, best practice isn't always best practice. And that you have this data driven, okay, we got best practice and good practice, but sometimes in the real world, what the research says is best practice isn't actually always what's best to make sure a rider is adapting or is responding to a certain stimulus.
What sort of tools are you using? We mentioned Vecta, and that might be, I've chatted with Paul Antoine, came over from Paris and sat here with a great chat, and founder of Vecta. There's a curiosity among the non-World Tour insiders as to what you guys are using. Training Peaks, Vecta, I know you're using Velo Viewer day to day, probably something for mapping wins as well, My Windsock or something. What other tools are you using that amateurs are kind of blind to?
Yeah, like there's nothing really super secret. I mean, we certainly are using Training Peaks and Vecta. They're kind of the two big ones. I think everyone has those. You got WKO5. We use, again, VeloViewer, which has really been a really useful thing that we can do to prepare for races. We can really dig into parcours and dig into the demands of events and demands of races. And that's something that, again, I'm not sure do amateurs do it. You go in and look at the Nationals parkour, you go in and look at it and say, okay, well, the Nationals is going to be, there's a 2K climb at 5% and we do a lap 10 times. Okay, how can I prepare for that? So that's how I will use VeloViewer for me. I'll go in and look at the routes of different races. It goes epic ride. I think I've our epic ride weather, whatever it's called.
Yeah, stupid name.
Yeah, it's just like I can't even. Yeah, it's a weird name.
£4 subscription though. They got to up that for the World Tour teams.
Yeah, exactly. We use that a lot. I would say we use that. Our DSs will send out every morning before races, so guys can see the risk of rain, and that allows us then to choose. Okay, tire pressure. If we're using different material, I mean, that's one of my key things I will use each day to make sure I can give the correct tire pressure to the mechanics that we can, okay, there's risk of rain in the final, therefore, okay, it's dry now, but we're going to run wet pressure on our.
Are you running SRAM or Shimano?
This year, Shimano. Yeah, Shimano. It may change next year. But yeah, where we've got Shimano, which is good.
But I'm not sure if Shimano has this, where I'm running SRAM, and on your hammerhead with the new zips, it displays tire pressure.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's cool.
It's really quite cool. I've seen some of the different tools that different teams have used where you can also modify tire pressure in something like a Roubaix. But I think that's probably one big thing that's really changed in the last few years is optimizing tire pressure. Like we have a company called Swisside who work with us, and they've got 2 simulation tools where we can chuck in a bunch of data. We can chuck in the parkour, the weather, expected race speed, and that will tell us what material to use. So we've got a range of different wheels that we have access to from Swisside, from 65s, 55s, 50s, 380s, and then they will run a simulation or algorithm on the parkour and say, okay, today your best setup is a 56 chain ring. Use the 550 wheels with this tire pressure.
But here's a hack for anyone listening. Dan Bingham gave me. Throw all that stuff in the ChatGPT. They'll spit out the exact same thing for you.
Exactly.
He said his edge has been eroded by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Bang in all the data, all your GPX files, all your parkour information, gear choices that you have, everything. Spit it all in and it'll spit out, he said, this fantastic recommendations.
100%. And that's also one that's becoming more useful now in teams is using AI, where you can go to a LAM or a ChatGPT. You pay your subscription to ChatGPT. Was a ChatGPT before now? You chuck in all your stuff, and it tells you what tire pressure to run, what gears you should use. I mean, it's something that we don't use systemically with the whole team, but yeah, those are some of the kind of key things we do use. Some software says nothing mind blowing, but we definitely have we definitely use a lot of software and information that we collect to make better decisions.
When I heard Decathlon were coming across to AG2R bikes, Decathlon's kind of discount feel to it, I think everyone in cycling had the same reaction, going, oh Jesus, that unlucky for the lads. Hasn't turned out that way at all. It's turned out to be a performance edge, if anything. Yeah. They've really invested into the bikes, into the aerodynamics, into the kit, into the helmets. What's it been like on the ground? Feedback from the riders? Are they happy with the stuff?
No, it's been incredible. It's been incredible. I mean, I've been involved in the team 7 years now, and we've had always a turnover of equipment and bikes every 2 years for different reasons. But with Decathlon now, I didn't know what Decathlon was until a few years ago. There was one built up here in Dublin a couple of years ago.
Get a €2 tube.
Yeah, and it was just something I was never really aware of. It was never around when we were.
They have one on O'Connell Street as well, actually now.
Oh, they have another one now. Yeah. But what they've done is they're a brand which really want to show that they're not just a budget brand that you can go in and buy everything, but they're also they have a high performance arm to it. That's what Van Rysel is now. I mean, really what Van Rysel have done is, and quite literally what they've done is I think it's been heavily said in the media that they went and they tested all the different bikes from different manufacturers, compared it with their current RCR, the RCR and the RCR-F. But what they did was they gave us the bike and said, you tell us what is the best wheels, the best tires, the best group set, the best handlebars, and then they allowed the team to be able to build the best package. I think it was some teams or some companies will bring the package to you, but we were allowed, with Van Rysel's help and the Decathlon's help, to really build the best package, which allowed us to again have one of the best performing setups.
I've never been a huge understander. You hear cycling journalists jump on a bike and they're like, oh, it's vertically compliant and horizontally I never have a clue what any of that means. I'd just be nodding along going, it feels grand. It feels basically the same as the last bike. Yeah. But do you see some of the guys say Bennett versus Felix Gall? Is there, Bennett obviously wants a bit stiffer. He wants it, probably less flex around the bottom bracket. I'm sure there's a few bits that, I know he's pretty geeky on his bikes. There's a few bits around there. How much input does he get versus GC rider get? Or are they riding different bikes? Yeah,
so we have 2 different bikes. We have the RCR-R, which is our lightweight climbing bike. We've got the RCR-F, which is our aero sprint bike. But what's really good with Van Rysel, they'll always have engineers there, and they'll always have feedback from the riders. And they're incredibly innovative in that they've produced this very, very good bike. But what's awesome is that even in December camp last year, they were there looking for more feedback from the riders so that they can develop the next iteration of the bike will be even better. So Sam he's really sensitive to stiffness when he sprints. He's putting out 1600 watts in a sprint, so he's very sensitive if the rear stays flex, or if there's too much flex in the bottom bracket, or if there's not enough flex in the bottom bracket. So he'll give feedback, and a lot of the time they will put that into their feedback loop. And with Felix and the climbers, they find the RCR almost too stiff. So like on some days, if there's a lot of like rough roads, it can be too stiff, so they can get like sore backs. So they also give feedback as well that they might try and make a bike less stiff, which is more compliant, that it's not creating any soreness or stiffness or sore backs. So it really is. I gotta say, they haven't just given us the bike and say, shut up and be happy. They're like, here's your bike. We're open to input, which you don't see very, very often.
We mentioned Sam as an Irish lad hooking up with Sam on the team. Maybe definitely the greatest Irish sprinter, out and out sprinter of all time, but one of the generational sprinters. You know, green jersey, Champs-Élysées win, Quick Step. He was kind of down on his fortune a little bit, and your job maybe was to rekindle those golden years for him. How did you approach that challenge? Like, what were those first conversations like?
Yeah, it was because I didn't know Sam well. I mean, I knew Sam. Obviously, we raced together back when I was racing. He was a 16-year-old, like bleached blonde hair, pierced ear.
Do you remember that? Yeah,
I do remember that. Yeah, like, who's this little shit trying to in
leaning on you?
Yeah, but it was it was good. I mean, I think one thing with Sam, what you learn with him is he's got no airs and graces. He's always wants to learn. You have a guy who's come in, he's probably won the best bike races. You know, that day he won in the Champs-Élysées in the green jersey. He's like, it's dream stuff. But he came into the team wanting to learn, and he had no preconceived biases. He wanted to learn and improve and get better. And again, he came from a difficult few years. He came into our team. Again, he had some injuries last year. He had some wins. He had his first ever GC win in Cat Euros at Dunkirk, which actually is 6 days instead of 4 days. But he won that last year with some. But he just works off of confidence. Like in Dunkirk last year, he won stage 2, 3, and 4, and I knew he was going to win stage 5 and stage 6, just because he just works off confidence. So he's been around a long time. I always said to Sam is that once you can on and get better, I'll tell you, but right now he's still getting, he still can get better. There's still areas that we are working on. There's still areas he needs to improve. But yeah, we should see him this year. He had some wins last year. He's had some wins this year. He hasn't, he didn't win the Giro this year, which is a disappointment. He's got some big World Tour races coming up. He's in Poland this week. Unfortunately, he crashed actually yesterday.
He went down on stage one.
He got some, he lost some skin, but he's in good shape, and it's cool to, it's pity I didn't meet him in my career earlier, but it's also cool to be able to work with a guy like Sam, who's, like I said, one of the foremost bike riders from Ireland.
Like, I wonder with Sam, it's such a game of confidence, it seems, in sprinting, and Sam seems to be as, if not more, susceptible to that confidence game than some people. Like, when he's winning, he's unplayable. Like, I've seen some sprints where he's not even a sprinter. He goes from a K out on a slight uphill finish in Tour of Turkey or of Vuelta, and he just rides away, and you're like, he literally put 15 seconds into the lad who came second. But then he struggles with form, and he almost wears his heart on his sleeve. As a viewer and as a fan, when someone's raced against him and then watching him from a distance, you almost feel like the Sam that knocked Viviani off that wheel in Tour of Britain to make that breakthrough of, like, who's this lad? He was bold and he was brash. Does money dull that at those key moments when you need to risk everything? Is he still risking like he used to?
Yeah, it's that's the big question is are you still willing to make those, again, not going to say life or death decisions, but sorry, those critical decisions and then those moments to really want to win? And Sam still has that, but you referenced there, even this year in Pays de Loire, he went and he attacked on this this 1.5k at 8%. He dropped like Kevin Vauquelin, who's like one of the breakout riders in the Tour de France. He was like 7th in the Tour de France GC, won a stage last year. Yet he's dropping him on an uphill finish. You're like, well, what the hell's going on here, And it's just confidence with Sam. It really is that. Does he still have that drive to win? No doubt about it. But sometimes in those run-ins, he questions himself and he doubts himself, and he just needs it to click. And once it clicks, then it can click then for multiple days in a row. Then he goes back home, he trains, and he's trying to find that. He's trying to find that click every time. And you get to a point in your career where he's won. I don't even know how many bike races he's won. He's won more than 60 bike races. But yeah, it's one thing you try to support him, to show him, yeah, man, you're strong. You can sprint. You're good. Just back yourself, believe yourself, and then go head to head with. Like we saw this year in Tirreno, he went head to head with Milan. John in Milan, he just missed out on winning the sprint in Tirreno. And then in the Giro, then it was days where he just kind of questioned himself, and he actually was never actually in the mix to sprint. So yeah, it's a different challenge, but yeah, my job really is to show him that you're still freaking strong.
And the watts are the same.
I mean, it's mad. Like the watts are almost better. It sounds almost stupid to say it, but like you look at him, his threshold is better than what it was 5 years ago. But the whole sport has also increased a lot or gone on. But in terms of peak power, yeah, he's not 200 watts less than what he was 5 years ago. You know, he's still there. It's trying to just be in the right position to execute those watts.
It's fascinating, Steve. I really appreciate you coming to chat, and it's
Pleasure.
Super insight. Like it's really, I could sit here for the next 2 hours and just listen. It's brilliant insight into what's going on at the World Tour on a really human level as well, without any, facade or veneer of bullshit, which you sometimes get.
But that's what's cool for me to chat. Like sometimes we chat about this session, that session, but it's also cool for me to kind of give people an idea that I'm a normal guy who from Cork, lived in Waterford, and now I'm working in a French team. I never spoke French in my entire life, so it's nice to show people that this is not some dream. That it's kind of cool. And I know I'm also in a privileged position. I can work on World Tour, and there's not a whole lot of World Tour coaches, so I'm always happy to come and chat. And
last question: you come back for one more, Ross?
I've only done two, so I mean I turned 40 this year. So I had these great ambitions to go and do a marathon or go and do something. So I'm not sure if I'm Timmy Barry-esque comeback, but
Ross is clashing with the Giro is the only thing for you.
God damn it, sorry, I won't be there.
Stephen, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure as well.